firstly, you see the devastation, not just physical devastation, but the devastation on families, the devastation on individuals, the devastation on communities, and that's the hard bit to reconcile. I think it's easy to say a number of homes have been destroyed, but when you see the home, it's a family's, it's somebody's possessions, it's someone's loved ones and their cherished items.
Obviously, the biggest issue is any town with a lot of infrastructure gone or a high percentage of the farms where the jobs will come from, the homes. If there are a few homes in a town, you rebuild them, but it's the towns that have been really smashed in that sense that are going to need the most help.
Yeah, and I think unlike a lot of disasters that Australia's had to deal with in the past, there's a consequential effect here around how many tourists have come into a town. It's not just what's been physically lost, it's the flow of traffic into the south coast, it's the tourist industry that's been affected. And if you're a small business on the south coast, you know that between November and March is your time to make a profit. That's been taken away. So the effect is quite broad.
So is that part of your remit as well, figuring out in the south coast there might be a whole heap of businesses that are on the surface completely unaffected in a physical sense, but what they'll need to keep going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is a large part of what the recovery agency will do and my job. A lot of our structures and payments and assistance to this point have been around being able to establish that you've lost something physically as a result of a disaster, or in this case, the bushfire. We have to expand that. We have to think about this much more broadly. And my lens, while we're focused on the here and now, the immediate, my lens is much more long term. What do we do to build the economy back in these regions? And of course, some of these regions are tourism regions. Some of them are primary producers. It's not one size fits all across the country.
Is it a case for a lot of those businesses cash grants and that gets them to a certain point? I guess you're in this space where money's not unlimited, but you want to make sure they get back on their feet. How do you balance that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, and I've got a responsibility to the taxpayer as well. This is taxpayer money that the government is using to help support communities get back on their feet. So effectively, we're looking at cash grants and moving cash into the communities to help people in those immediate phases. And that does a lot of things. That helps the individual who may need to re-establish themselves. It also helps the local economy. But more importantly, we need to look at the long term. What will actually make a sustainable difference? How can we rebuild communities to be more resilient? How can we rebuild communities to be perhaps in some aspects better than they were before?
I want to try to go to a specific, so Batlow, it's a small town a lot of senior MPs have visited and people have heard a lot about. So the apple orchards, the pine plantations, most of them are gone. How can that town survive over not 6 months, but 5 years, 10 years, the jobs that are gone there?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, whole industries may be destroyed in some aspects in some regions. So I think the first principle is we'll listen to the local community, we'll listen to those who know best how they can rebuild. We're not going to try and make a community rebuild the way it was before if that's not sustainable. So if there's alternatives, if there's other ways that a community can rebuild, then we'll work with them on that.
So in a town such as Batlow, it might well be that orchards and plantations are replanted, so they attempt that, but something else is needed as well. Is that
possibly? I mean, I don't want to presuppose this. I haven't visited Batlow myself. I know it's had a lot of visits, but this is where we want to build these regional economic plans and understand what's actually going to be best for that particular region. If it's rebuilding orchards, then fantastic. If there's other industry or other opportunities, then we should look at that as well.
Is there a fear in the towns themselves that maybe people will say, this is such a long rebuild, this is too hard? And a lot of towns that already we're sort of fighting for every citizen. We're trying to make sure they kept their size. We know the generational issue, and they're worried that this is going to be a hammer blow.
Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things I've learned already is people aren't ready to make that decision. And I think we can presuppose too much, and certainly from a government's perspective, we want to get in and help. But some of these people aren't ready to decide, do they want to rebuild yet? Do they want to try and go through the pain and anguish of setting up a business? Or do they want to change their business? Or do they want to sell up and move on? Now, we don't want people to do that, obviously. But these are decisions that individuals have to make, and we can't pressure them to make it now.
If someone is wanting to go, might be a whole lot of different reasons, including where they're at life. They're in the situation, I suppose, I mean, if you've got a destroyed shop, you have insurance. If you don't and you sell up and you're going back to the city, I guess in that stage you buy yourself. That's up to you. You're not necessarily part of the recovery fund.
Well, look, my principle is I want to help everybody. Now, there's challenges around. Some people are insured and some aren't, and we'll need to find a way through that. But my starting premise is I need to help, and I want to help everybody recover. So
someone that's not insured, they're not going to get nothing. It might be hard to pretend they were insured, because then you've got to think of people.
That's right.
They're going to say, I was insured, this person can't get the same as what
That's
I have.
right.
What do you do there?
It's not my job to be the de facto insurer, but of course we need to work that through, and it'll be individual case by case.
The Prime Minister as well has said that this is going to be modelled on the Queensland flood response. Yes. Specifically, what was learnt out of that?
Well, a few things were learnt. Firstly, it needs to be local. It needs to be locally generated, the response, and that we need to be quick and get money, cash flowing back into the communities to help, in that case, farmers largely and small businesses rebuild. We've also learned a lot about what can slow the regrowth and the rebuilding down. I mean, we've seen Australia's fantastic in these situations. We're so charitable and generous, but that can also work against us at times. We need to make sure that we're not displacing the local economy. We're not displacing local employment by bringing in outside help. So things like that are important for me to learn from.
And this can even include the army bringing in food for people and a local shop saying, hey, we're trying to sell a few, hamburgers or fish and chips at lunchtime.
Yep, couldn't agree more. I mean, let's be honest, the army is a great consumer of local services, so I want to see them as a consumer of local services, not a replacer of local services. So, but it's not just the army. There's armies of volunteers across the country who want to do things. My principle is, if there's local tradies available, if there's a local business that can supply the good, then that's what we should be doing.
And it's an if, though. I mean, you're talking about some of these small towns. If you're rebuilding 12 or 15 homes, you're not going to have all locals doing that, and it could be a bit of a bonanza for tradies willing to come from the biggest cities and do these jobs as well.
Yeah, and even that's a challenge too. I mean, we've seen this before in natural disasters where an area could be flooded with trades, and that creates disequilibriums across the country in terms of where resources are and where trades are. So we need to work all of this through.
Well, I know you've got a busy day ahead of you, Victoria, and the South Coast. We'll let you get back to it, but thanks for your time today.
I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.